This building site's something of a success story, a foreign firm opening a factory in Egypt. It'll bring money and create thousands of jobs, the kind of investment the country so desperately needs. With the biggest consumer market in the Arab world, relatively cheap labour and good proximity to Europe, you can see its appeal, at least on paper. But instability means few international companies have been attracted to Egypt since its revolution. And that was before the country got a new interim government, one ushered to power by an army that ousted an elected leader. An army whose attacks on supporters of that former president last week have been widely condemned. Multinationals, from oil giants and car makers to electronic firms and brewers, closed offices and factories and told workers to stay at home as violence flared. Most are now trying to get back to work, but those advising on issues like security say the fraught situation's a huge setback for the economy.
We will see the continued outflow of investors and operators from Egypt. That doesn't necessarily mean it will be an exodus. I think each company, the considerations will be different. How big is their exposure in Egypt? What sort of obligations do they have to their personnel? What is the overall importance of their Egypt operations to their business? In terms of foreign sentiment, I think, of course, it's negative. I think that the clearing of the protests at Rab al Adawiya and Nata Square have started to provoke a sort of self-reflection. I think that even among companies with a higher risk tolerance, today's Egypt is a bit more daunting.
And if you can't persuade foreign investors to come, then tourists are going to be an even tougher sell. That's damaging when tourism makes up more than 10% of Egypt's economy. As you'd expect, travel warnings have made Cairo a no-go zone for visitors in recent days. But countries including Germany are now saying even the popular Red Sea resorts, a world away from the capital, are not safe, meaning more cancellations for already struggling businesses. In the last few months, Egypt's government's been spending twice as much as it receives in revenues. And without foreign investors or visitors, that leaves it dependent on borrowing and foreign aid. But the International Monetary Fund says it won't engage in talks on loans until the interim government's recognised by the international community. And the US and the European Union are under pressure to cut aid to Egypt, losses that could amount to $7 billion a year. After Mohammed Morsi was deposed, Gulf nations critical of the Muslim Brotherhood were quick to step in with offers of aid. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and here in the United Arab Emirates have pledged around $12 billion, with more likely to follow. And while there's no doubt that's a huge sum for Egypt, it won't last forever.
An IMF deal remains critical at this point. A few months down the road, as I said, you have the breathing space of the $12 billion, but thinking over the coming 24 to 36 months, you need an IMF program.
IMF money would have strings attached, forcing the government to make deep and deeply unpopular economic reforms, like cutting subsidies on food and fuel. The previous government wouldn't accept those terms, and most think Egypt's current leaders have enough on their minds already.
The capacity for managing Egypt's economic crisis is structurally low to begin with, and I think that in the current environment, a very polarized political environment, it has moved down the chain of priorities for anyone who could be in a position to make moves to improve the economic environment.
This week, a court ordered that the man Egypt's revolution toppled, Hosni Mubarak, be freed from prison. For Egyptians facing today's political and economic realities, the mood of hope which that revolution brought is a distant memory.